Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam kol niv'dibro. Hello. Great to be with you on a Monday. No music during the countdown these days because we're in the 9 days. These are the days that we recall the calamity of the destruction of both temples, which happened on the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av. That date falls this coming Shabbos, and so we'll observe the fast the day after on Sunday. But during the 9 days, we have mourning practices. We're not shaving. We don't listen to music. We don't drink wine or eat meat except on Shabbos. And we really try to diminish our joy during the 9 days so that the loss of the temples is real to us. How is everybody doing? Great to be learning with you. Sharon in New Jersey, James in Indianapolis, Guy in Ohio, Stephen in New Hampshire, John in Maine, Melissa in Great Neck, Paul in the Great Northwest, Rebecca in LA, Bella in Florida, Shandor in the Bronx, Annie in Michigan, Christine in Texas, Allison in North Carolina, Ira in South Carolina, Sandy in Michigan, Charles in Omaha, Arthur in Michigan, Sharon in New Jersey, right? I've been reading Job all week and now on to Eicha, Lamentations. I am ready for some less depressing reading material. Amen. Pauline in Chicagoland, Belle in Texas, Nancy in North Carolina, Bob in Washington, Barbara in Arkansas, Ethel in Scottsville. Don't jump around on me, my screen. Over there on the YouTube side, Yitzhak in Kansas City, Marjorie in Georgia, Marie says shalom. Welcome everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily, sponsored by Wayne Marble, with a very simple message. Please, Sal, say shalom pearl. So shalom pearl. And thank you, Wayne. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world by sponsoring today's episode. If anybody would like to sponsor an episode in somebody's honor or in their memory or for their healing, you can just find the donate button at accidentaltalmudist.org. And Nina will put the link in the comments there as well. All right. Get set up here. And where are we? So today's daf is page 26 here in Tractate Kesubos, the 15th volume of the Talmud. Generally the laws of marriage contracts, but here in chapter 2, and we're completing our discussion of Mishnah number 6 and beginning Mishnah number 7. And we're getting to some more general laws of testimony establishing the status of a transaction or of a person according to certain actions that they've been observed, taken, certain practices that they've done, witnesses who come forward, and generally sort of asking who is deemed credible and who isn't in their testimony. Why would somebody have a presumptive status here in Mishnah number 6 of a priest? And what would cause us to uproot that presumptive status of priesthood for a Jewish man? I recall that a priest is a descendant of Aaron, in whose lineage the priesthood, the kahuna, was vested, so that when the temple is standing, those are the people who are qualified to serve in the temple. In the absence of the temple, what does a Cohen do? He blesses the congregation at certain times of the year. In Israel, they do that in every day. Outside of Israel, basically we do it on holidays. And also when we have a Torah service, when we're reading the Torah publicly in synagogue, and we have a series of aliyahs, people who are called up to make a blessing over the reading of the Torah. If there's a Cohen in the congregation, he'll go first, then the Levite, and then everybody else. All right, so we pick this up a few paragraphs into page 26a, And it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, just as teruma establishes the presumptive status for priesthood, so too the first tithe establishes the presumptive status for priesthood. Now, this is a surprise. We've been talking about if we've observed that a Jewish man, when the temple is standing, eats teruma. All right, so if he eats teruma, that means he's eating food that is consecrated as a gift to the priests, and only priests are allowed to eat of it. So if he's eating, we assume he's a priest. Do we elevate from teruma to lineage to say that, well, because he's eating teruma, we can assume that he is a priest of unflawed lineage? The sages have been arguing about that these last few pages. Some other attributes that a Jewish man might have, which might cause us to assume or to create a presumptive status that he is a priest, is not only that he eats teruma, but that he receives teruma, right? So when farmers in Israel are growing produce, the first 2% is consecrated as teruma. It's given to a priest. But if he doesn't know a priest, you sort of put it in a teruma collection center, and then priests can go there and receive teruma from the one who is distributing teruma. Do they lift hands, right? Do they stand in front of the congregation and bless the congregation with the priestly blessing? Can we elevate them in terms of their lineage, that they have unflawed lineage from that? We've seen that it's a debate. If we see that a father comes to court and says, I'm a priest and my son is a priest, usually that's enough to say that the son is a priest. There's a little bit of a doubt because even though your father is a priest, if your father married a woman who is not fit to marry a priest, for example, she's a divorcee, a divorced woman can marry any Jew except a priest. Now, we had the question yesterday, if in modern times a priest, a Cohen, marries a divorced woman, can he still go up to the front of the congregation and bless the congregation, like I said, every day in Israel or on holidays outside of Israel? And the answer is no, he's not supposed to, right? If he married a divorcee, he's not supposed to. However, we don't examine people and ask them, like, who did you marry and what is your lineage? The stakes are lower in this regard. However, the fact is, I did a little research about this yesterday, an Orthodox rabbi will not perform the ceremony of a Cohen marrying a divorced woman. He's not supposed to do that. However, it's interesting, they will seek to create a leniency in this regard if possible. If, for example, the woman is divorced, but if they find a flaw, in her original marriage, if her ketubah was not witnessed properly or something like that, they will sort of, create a possibility that she was never really married and therefore she was never really divorced. And so this man can marry her and not be, disqualified as a priest. When the temple is standing, the stakes are much higher in this regard. Also, we establish a priest by witness testimony. Okay, if two witnesses come forward and we say, we know this man is a priest. His father was a priest. His father was a fit, qualified priest, and he married a woman who was qualified to be his wife, and this man is a priest. So that's another way to establish the status of a priest. Here, on page 26a, we just encounter this idea that somebody who partakes of the first tithe, that might be evidence that he's a priest. Now, this is a surprise. This should not work. The Gemara is going to explain why it might work. It should not work because what is the first tithe? Meiser Rishon. This is the tithe of the Levite, right? So when the temple is standing and all the farmers in Israel are tithing properly, so the first 2% of the produce goes to a priest, and then the next 10% goes to the Levites. Now, priests are Levites, right? Because Aaron was part of the Levite tribe. So they're a subset of the Levites. But while all priests are Levites, certainly not all Levites are priests. I'm a Levite. I'm not a priest. So the fact that somebody received first tithe, why would that in any way indicate or, even prove, let alone prove that he's a priest? All it indicates is that he's a Levite. But as we'll see, there was a period when only priests, only the subset of the Levites who were priests, were receiving the first tithe, and we'll see why that was. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, just as teruma establishes the presumptive status of priesthood, so too the first tithe establishes the presumptive status for priesthood. And one who receives a share of teruma in court does not establish presumptive status of priesthood. Now we're going to unpack this baraisa. The Gemara asks, first tithe is given to a Levite. How does it establish the presumptive status of priesthood? And the Gemara answers, this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, as it is taught in a baraisa. Teruma is given to a priest, first tithe given to a Levite. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, first tithe is given to a priest as well. So the Gemara asks, well, say that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to a priest as well. Did actually he say to a priest and not to a Levite? Since it is given to both a Levite and a priest, first tithe cannot establish the presumptive status of priesthood. And the Gemara answers, yes, first tithe can establish the presumptive status of priesthood. How? After Ezra penalized the Levites for failure to return to Eretz Yisrael from Babylonia, he decreed that the people should not give them first tithe. Although by Torah law, first tithe may be given to both Levites and priests, after Ezra's decree, it was given only to priests. Right? So when the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar's army, the Jews were exiled out of the land of Israel and taken to Babylonia, and that lasted 70 years. And then Ezra led a group, a subset of the children of Israel back into the land of Israel, and eventually they built the second temple. Apparently, the Levites were comfortable in Babylonia and didn't come with this group, or maybe very few of them came. So Ezra penalized the Levites that they would not receive Meiser Rishon, they would not receive the first tithe, but rather it would only be given to a subset of the Levites, namely the priests. Right, so the Gemara asks, how can the presumptive status of priesthood be established? But perhaps in this case, he was actually a Levite, and by happenstance they gave him the first tithe. So Rav Chisda said, with what are we dealing here? It is a case where the father of that man established the presumptive status of priesthood before us, and a rumor emerged about the son that he is the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza. Now, as a halal who is disqualified from the priesthood, his legal status is that of an Israelite. And it was seen that the son himself received a share of the first tithe at the threshing floor. Right, so it's this very specific case where you have a family of priests, right? So we know that this man is the son of a priest, so therefore he's a priest. However, a doubt was raised, a rumor went around that perhaps his father married a divorced woman, and so therefore his son is disqualified from the priesthood. So now, even though he's a priest, born a priest, and therefore a Levite as well, once he's disqualified as a halal, he not only doesn't receive teruma, he also doesn't receive first tithe. But if we observe that he's receiving first tithe, it must be that he was not disqualified as a halal, and that's why receiving first tithe can contribute to establishing this person as a priest and have a presumptive legal status of a priest. So therefore, with regard to Levite status, it is clear that he is not a Levite, as his father is a priest, not a mere Levite, as it were. And the Gemara asks, well, what then is there to say? Is it that he is the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza, right? A woman who underwent chalitza is like a divorcee, and she also is prohibited to marry a priest. So it is not necessary to say that according to the one who says that first tithe is forbidden to non-priests, they would not have given the first tithe to the son of the divorcee, as his legal status is that of a non-priest. However, even according to the one who says that first tithe is permitted for non-priests, and therefore the fact that he received first tithe proves nothing, that law applies only to the fact that it is permitted for one to whom the first tithe produce was distributed to provide it to non-priests. However, in the form of a share of the first tithe at the threshing floor, one does not give it to a non-priest. Therefore, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the fact that one receives a share at the threshing floor proves that he is a priest of unflawed lineage. Right? If it's during a time where first tithe is only given to priests, so receiving first tithe would indicate that he's a priest, or if it's during a time when first tithe is given to Levites, including priests, then it would only establish that he's a priest if we had a doubt that he was actually completely disqualified from the priesthood, and then we saw that he received first tithe, and so then we would say, oh, he's a priest and he's not disqualified as a priest. It is taught in the same Baraisa, and one who receives a share of teruma in court does not establish the presumptive status of priesthood. And the Gemara asks, if in court it does not establish the presumptive status, where does it establish the presumptive status? It's funny. Isn't court the place where matters are optimally clarified? So if you're going to say that one who receives teruma, that indicates that he's a priest, why would you then say, but if he receives it in court, that doesn't indicate that he's a priest? What the heck are you talking about? If he receives it in court, that's the best place to receive it in order to establish if there's anything that can legally be derived from somebody receiving teruma, why would we then not take that derivation if you receive the teruma in court? And Rav Sheshes said that this is what the Tana is saying. One who receives a share of teruma from his father's property with his brothers in court as his portion of an inheritance, in doing so does not establish presumptive status of priesthood. Even if he is a halal and therefore a non-priest, it could be that he owns the teruma as part of his inheritance. Very interesting. So there was a priest who had a certain inventory, a stockpile of teruma in his property, and then he died, and so his property went to his sons. Now his sons were not all sons by the same mom, right? This priest had more than one wife. So some of the sons are qualified priests, right? Because their mom was not disqualified from marrying their father. But let's say that one of the sons is a halal because, this second wife or this other wife of the priest, the father priest, was a divorcee. He shouldn't have married her. His son by her is a halal, disqualified from being a priest. Now, as his father's son, he still inherits some of the property, which includes teruma. He's not allowed to eat it. He's going to have to take the teruma that he inherited and give it away to a priest so that it can be eaten. He has the ability to choose which priest he gives it to, but not to eat it. And so that's why they're saying one who receives teruma in court, we can't assume that he's a qualified priest from that. So the Gemara asks, it is obvious that receiving teruma in court does not establish the presumptive status. So the Gemara answers, well, lest you say that from the fact that these brothers receive the teruma to partake of it, it can be deduced that the brother also receives the teruma to partake of it. The Tan of our Baraisa therefore teaches us that these brothers receive the teruma to partake of it, and that brother, the disqualified brother, receives it to sell it. The fact that he may not eat the teruma does not prevent him from selling it. New subject. We learned in the Mishna that Rabbi Yehuda says one does not elevate a man to priesthood on the basis of one witness. And Rabbi Elazar says in a case where there are no challengers, one elevates a man to priesthood on the basis of one witness. Now, this is a little bit of a surprise, right? So we think that everything according to Jewish law that is established through witness testimony can only be established by the testimony of two witnesses. And we said the exception to that is when a husband has disappeared overseas and we don't want his wife to be stuck forever waiting to find out what happened to him. And if a single witness comes and says, well, that man died, then she can go to the court and say, I'd like the court to ratify that I'm going to marry according to the testimony of one witness, that my husband is dead. She's taking a chance. If the husband comes back, she's going to be prohibited to her new husband and to her old husband, but she can remarry based on the testimony of a single witness. So here, where they're saying, well, we can elevate a man to be have presumptive status of a priest based on the testimony of a single witness. Now, it's not really the testimony of a single witness, because the idea is whether someone is a priest or not can be established by other means. And this witness who comes, it's not so much that he's testifying and creating that status through his testimony, it's that he's revealing information which is otherwise available. We saw that earlier. So nevertheless, we're saying, but the effect is that this person could receive the presumptive status that he's a priest from the testimony of a single witness. But this is limited to where there are no challengers. He heard it from one person who knew his father was a priest and that he's a priest, so we'll say he's a priest. But if there are challengers who say, well, actually, no, I knew his father wasn't a priest, or I knew his father and his father married a divorced woman, that's who this boy's mother is. So if there are challengers, then we don't accept the testimony of a single witness to elevate this man to priesthood. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, one elevates a man to priesthood on the basis of one witness. And the Gemara asks, the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is identical to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, as they agree that one elevates a man to priesthood on the basis of one witness when there are no challengers. And if you would say that there is a difference between them in a case where there is a challenge posed by one witness, the challenger is also a single witness. As Rabbi Eliezer holds, a challenge posed by one witness is sufficient to undermine one's presumptive status of priesthood, and now two witnesses are required to overcome that challenge. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds an effective challenge requires two witnesses. Now, didn't Rabbi Yochanan say everyone agrees that there is no effective challenge with fewer than two witnesses? Rather, with what are we dealing here? It is in a case where the father of that man established his presumptive status of priesthood before us, the court, and a rumor emerged about the son that, yes, he's the son of a priest, but he is the son of a divorced woman, or he's the son of a chalutza, a woman who underwent chalitza, right, when her husband died, and then she chose not to marry his brother. So she went through chalitza, and that gives her the status of a divorcee, and she's prohibited to marry a priest. But let's say she went ahead and married him anyway. So now this son is disqualified, right? So it is a case where the father established the presumptive status of the son's priesthood, but a rumor emerged about the son that he is the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza, and therefore we downgraded him from the presumptive status of priesthood. And now you see that because the priesthood, it has such a high level of stringency that we want to ensure that the priests who bring the sacred offerings of Israel on the altar in the Holy Temple, when the temple is standing, they have to have impeccable lineage, impeccable sanctity. And that's why a rumor that they might be the son of a divorcee is enough to downgrade them. And now we have to do further investigation before they're allowed to serve in the temple. And so when you hear that just a rumor is enough to downgrade, now you see why single witness testimony has a role in the establishing the status of a priest. So we continue. And a rumor. Where am I? Right, so this is a case where the father of that man established the presumptive status of priesthood before us, and a rumor emerged about the son that he is the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza, and so we downgraded him from the presumptive status of priesthood. And then one witness came and said, I know that he is a priest of unflawed lineage, and therefore we elevated him back to the priesthood, as one witness is sufficient to negate the rumor. But then two witnesses came and said, no, he's the son of a divorced woman or the son of a chalutza. So we downgraded him from the priesthood, as two witnesses negate the testimony of one witness. But then another witness, single witness, came and said, I know that he is a priest of unflawed lineage. And everyone agrees that the two single witnesses joined together, right? There was a rumor, and then a single witness came and said the rumor's false, he's qualified. Then two witnesses, then a single witness came and said, no, no good, right? That was a single witness after the rumor. And then two witnesses came and said, no, the rumor's true. He is a flawed lineage. But then another single witness comes and says, no, he has unflawed lineage. So now what you have is two witnesses who said he is a priest of unflawed lineage. They didn't come at the same time. They came one earlier and one later. But now we have two witnesses that say his lineage is unflawed. Now, you might ask, well, wait a minute. You also had two witnesses who said his lineage is flawed. So isn't that uncertainty? We have two witnesses versus two witnesses. But here they're saying, even so, I guess because we have two witnesses versus two witnesses, but the original presumption came from his father who said, no, I'm a priest and he is a qualified priest. So we have that coupled with two witnesses who say, and that is true, and that's enough to keep the presumptive status that the son is a priest. Now, and here it is with regard to concern that it will lead to contempt for the court that our sages disagree. Right? The problem isn't the order of testimony. It's the fact that because we downgraded and upgraded, that people are going to say, what is up with this court? The judges don't know what they're doing, right? So the first Tana, Rabbi Eliezer holds, once we downgraded him from the priesthood, we do not then elevate him. We are concerned that it will lead to contempt for the court, as the reversal in the court decisions create the impression that the court does not know what it's doing. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds, we downgrade him from the priesthood and we then elevate him. And as for the possibility that it will lead to contempt for the court, we are not concerned about it. Honor Shmonor. We want the truth. The primary concern is that the matter be determined based on the relevant testimonies. And if we have to flip-flop, as it were, because that was the information that came before the court in a series of testimonies that didn't come all at once, well, that's what happened. So Rav Ashi strongly objects. Well, if so, if they disagree with regard to contempt for the court, why is it necessary to establish the dispute in a case where the witness who testified that he is a priest of unflawed lineage came individually? If so, then even if two witnesses testify together that he is unfit for the priesthood and the court downgraded him, and then two witnesses testify together that he is fit for the priesthood and the court elevated him, the Tanaim would also disagree, as the same concern for contempt of court applies. It must be that the issue that these sages are disagreeing about is not whether or not this sequence of events will create contempt for the court, but something else. And by the way, we're well into page 26b now. Rather, Rav Ashi said, it is with regard to whether two single witnesses join together and constitute two witnesses for the purpose of testimony that they disagree. And it is in the dispute between these Tanaim that they disagree, as it is taught in a Baraisa. Right? The question now is, we said there were two witnesses who said his lineage is flawed, and two witnesses who said, no, his lineage is good. He is a priest in good standing. But the two who said he's a priest in good standing didn't come together. Let's say one of them came on Tuesday and the other one came on Friday. So do we accept this as the testimony of two witnesses or not? As it's... I never lit the candle? Let's light up the darkness. I didn't notice either. Okay. The 9 days. Everything is off during the 9 days. Okay. Where am I? Right. So can we join together this as the testimony of two witnesses when they don't come at the same time? As it is taught in a Baraisa. The testimony of individual witnesses merges into the testimony of two witnesses only if the two of them saw the incident transpire together as one. Right? So you could, if two witnesses are coming to say that, well, we know he's a priest in good standing. How do we know that? Because we saw him receive priestly portions in the temple, right? But maybe one of them says, because I saw him receive priestly portions in the temple. And the other one says, because I saw him receive teruma at the granary. Or I saw him receive priestly portions in the temple this year. And the other one says, I saw him receive priestly portions in the temple last year. So they didn't witness the same event. So can we tie together their testimony or not? One idea is no, right? So according to this, the testimony of individual witnesses merges into the testimony of two witnesses only if the two of them saw the incident transpire together as one. But Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says their testimony merges even in a case where this witness saw the incident after that witness. However, the testimony of witnesses is validated in court only if the two of them testify together as one, meaning they showed up in court on the same day. Rabbi Nussin says they need not even testify together. But even if the court hears the testimony of this witness today, and when his fellow witness comes tomorrow, the court hears his statement, then their testimonies merge, and we consider that the testimony of two witnesses. Rabbi Eliezer holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, and therefore the testimony of the second witness cannot be merged with the testimony of the first witness, and the person remains a halal, disqualified. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds that the testimony of the two witnesses that he is a priest of unflawed lineage, even though they came on different days, we merge those two testimonies together, and we say that that's the testimony of two witnesses, and his presumptive status of priesthood is restored as it was already established that his father is a priest. That's where we started, right? So he started as a priest. He had the presumptive status of a priest. Two witnesses came and said he's disqualified. Then two more witnesses came and said, no, those witnesses are wrong. He is qualified. So we reestablish the original status quo, and this priest is qualified to serve. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 6 here in chapter 2. New subject, Mishnah number 7. In the case of a woman who was imprisoned by Gentiles due to a monetary offense committed by her husband, once she is released after he pays his debt, she is permitted to her husband, even if he is a priest. There is no concern that they violated her because their objective is to coerce the husband to pay his debt in exchange for her release. Were they to abuse her, it is possible that he would be unwilling to pay because then she would be prohibited to him if he's a priest. However, if a woman was imprisoned due to a capital offense and sentenced to death, but then she was released, then she becomes forbidden to her husband, even if he is not a priest, due to the concern that perhaps her captors violated her and she acquiesced to one of them, right? Kind of like a Stockholm syndrome situation. She was in prison for a long time. Maybe she was raped and maybe she went along with it. Listen, this is not my opinion. This is what it says here. And so a doubt would be created. What they're working with is the law of adultery, right? So if a Jewish woman, cheated on her husband and had sex with another man willingly, then she becomes prohibited to her husband. And so that is the concern that this might have happened, and she would have to bring evidence that that did not happen. Now the Gemara. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak said that Rav said, they taught this Mishnah only in a case where the authority of the Jewish people is dominant over the nations of the world, and the Gentiles are law-abiding citizens. However, in terms of that she would be permitted to her husband if when she was a captive, it was over a monetary issue as opposed to something else. However, when the authority of the nations of the world is dominant over themselves, and that's a euphemism for dominance over the Jewish people, then even a woman who is imprisoned due to a monetary offense is forbidden to her husband, as there is nothing preventing her jailers from violating her, right? And that's certainly been the situation that we've been in for most of Jewish history. It was really only like during King Solomon's time when the Jewish people sort of, really only then when the Jewish people were sort of so dominant. King Solomon had so much power that the surrounding nations wouldn't dare violate a Jewish woman. But the Jewish people have been a tiny minority and persecuted so much throughout history, that if a woman was held captive by non-Jews, the assumption was that she was raped. Now, if she was raped, there's no problem of her returning to her husband. That's not her fault. The problem would be if there was reason to think that she acquiesced, in that violation. Why would she do that? And that's why perhaps they're bringing this case where she was sentenced to die, right? She was not just taken captive, she was taken captive and accused of a capital offense, and that she was going to be executed, and then somehow she comes back. So I guess maybe what they're saying is there's some suspicion, that she seduced one of her captors, and that's how she got out of captivity. I don't know. All we're playing with is possibilities, doubts, and uncertainties here. Let's see what they say in the Gemara. Rava raised an objection from a Mishna. Rabbi Yosei the priest and Rabbi Zechariah ben Hakatzav testified about a Jewish woman about whom witnesses testified that she was taken as collateral for a debt in Ashkelon. And the members of her family who suspected that she engaged in intercourse there distanced themselves from her. But her witnesses testified about her that she neither entered into seclusion with her captors nor was violated. And the sages said to the members of the family, if you deem the witnesses credible to testify that she was taken captive to be collateral for this debt of her husband's, well, then you should also deem the witnesses credible to testify that she neither entered into seclusion nor was violated. And if you do not deem the witnesses credible to testify that she neither entered into seclusion nor was violated, well, then you should also not deem the witnesses credible to say that she was taken captive in the first place. Either way, this woman remains permitted to her husband. You see that while the letter of the law might cut against this woman's interests, in practice, the sages found a leniency to leave her permitted and believe her and, allow her to continue with her life. So Rava asks, but this took place in Ashkelon, which is a place where the authority of the nations of the world is dominant over themselves, meaning dominant over the Jewish people, as that was a city of Gentiles. And it is taught, if she is taken, and I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. It's a very short show tonight. If she was taken as security in a case where her husband stipulated that if he fails to pay a debt, the Gentiles may take his wife and do with her as they please, yes, she requires witnesses to testify that she was not violated. However, if she was imprisoned by the authorities, no, she is deemed untainted even without witnesses. So apparently the distinction is not based on the dominance of the Jewish people. Rather, it is based on the manner in which she was apprehended. And the Gemara answers the same is true, that she is forbidden to her husband even if she was imprisoned. And the reason that the Tanaim testified about a case where she was taken as security is because the incident that transpired in that manner. So where does the law end up on this question? A woman who was imprisoned. There's the halacha. If a woman was imprisoned by Gentiles for a monetary offense, she is permitted to her husband even if he is a priest. However, if she was imprisoned for a capital offense, she is disqualified from marrying a priest. If she is the wife of a priest, she is forbidden to him, but she remains permitted to her husband if he's just a regular Jew. The Rima cites Tosafos and the Tur, who rule that if she was imprisoned for a capital offense, she is forbidden to her husband even if he is not a priest, as she is suspected of willingly submitting to her captors. The Rima cites a distinction between a case where the woman is accused of a capital crime in which she is rendered unfit, and a case where it is her husband who is accused in which she is not rendered unfit. Others add that even when she is the one accused, if there is a manner in which she could be redeemed, she is not rendered unfit, because were they to abuse her, it is possible that she would not be redeemed. During periods of persecution, the ruling of the Rambam, which was more lenient, was adopted. And basically, it's always a period of persecution. Okay, that's where we leave off. Tomorrow we'll pick that up on page 27. Let's see if we've got any questions or comments. On Kesubos 26. Sharon, how will we be able to know if a person is a Cohen of impeccable lineage when the third temple is restored? I'm pretty sure that the answer to that question is the Messiah will reveal it. Like, honestly. When the third temple is restored, it won't be because, the Jews engage in a construction project. The third temple is not going to be built until Mashiach comes. And when Mashiach comes, there are a whole bunch of halachic issues which we're not able to figure out now. At that time, they will be revealed, right? Elijah will come. Sometimes we say it's when Elijah will come and he'll reveal the answer, or when Mashiach comes. But at that time, when the temple is rebuilt and we are finally able to fulfill many of the commandments of the Torah that we cannot fulfill in the absence of a temple, the temple will go up in a day miraculously. And, if God is going to go to the trouble of miraculously building the third temple, he's also going to reveal to us who are the priests that are fit to serve there. And it might even be that there are no priests of totally unflawed lineage, but somehow they're going to be rendered pure. We don't exactly understand how that's going to happen. Or maybe there's so many priests in the world that somehow over these thousands of years, some of them have remained of unflawed lineage. How do we know which ones? Mashiach will tell us. Sharon, can a doctor who is a Cohen, who surely was in contact within the week of the holiday with a dead person, go up for duchening? Great question. I mean, see, the thing is, whether he was in contact, what Sharon is asking is, when a Cohen is rendered impure through contact with a mace, with a corpse, so then that's a very strong kind of tuma, ritual impurity, and he would not be qualified to enter the temple when the temple is standing. So how can he stand in front of the congregation and bless the people if it's less than a week? But see, the week doesn't really matter, because we all have tumas mace, right? We all have tuma of coming into contact with a corpse, because even if a week has passed, and even if we immerse in a mikveh at the end of it, what we don't have is the ashes of the red heifer and the waters of purification, right? So nobody has been purified from corpse tuma. So that's just, we don't have that requirement for duchening. Now, is it just, what laws can we fulfill even in the absence of the waters of purification? I don't know the answer to that question. I just don't know offhand. Is there now a modern halacha that a Cohen, who's been in a cemetery in the past week, whether he's allowed to duchen or not? I just don't know. I'd have to look that up. And Stephen, how do Kohanim fit in with Deuteronomy chapter 13? I mean, I have no idea what this question means. There's a lot of laws in Deuteronomy chapter 13, and I'm not sure what question is being asked here. So that's what I've got for today, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow to continue our discussion of Mishna number 7 on page 27 of Tractate Kesubos. Have a great night.